The phone buzzed against the floorboards, a terrified heartbeat in the dark. Inside the coat closet, 7-year-old Lily held her breath, tears streaming down a face pale with terror. Outside that thin wooden door, glass shattered. A woman screamed. Lily's hands shook so hard she could barely type. She thought she was texting her grandmother. She was wrong. She typed 4 words that would bring a war to her doorstep. "He's beating my mom." She hit send. She didn't know she had just messaged Dante Moretti, the most dangerous man in Chicago. And Dante doesn't call the cops. He handles things himself. Sarah Miller wiped the counter at the Rusty Spoon for the 100th time that night, the smell of stale coffee and grease clinging to her hair like a second skin. Her feet throbbed in her worn-out sneakers. It was 10:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the diner was empty except for old man Higgins nursing a pie he hadn't touched in an hour. "I'm closing up, Mr. Higgins," Sarah said softly, her voice raspy from exhaustion. Right. You get home to that little girl, Sarah." The old man mumbled, dropping a $5 bill on the table. It was more than the pie cost. He knew. Everyone in the neighborhood knew, even if they pretended they didn't see the bruises Sarah tried to hide with heavy concealer. Sarah walked out into the biting Chicago wind, pulling her coat tight. The November air cut through the fabric, but the cold was nothing compared to the knot of dread tightening in her stomach. Going home meant facing him. Brad. 2 years ago, Brad had been charming, a construction foreman with a steady paycheck and a smile that reached his eyes. But then the layoffs happened. Then the drinking started. Now he was a volatile explosive, and Sarah was tired of walking through the minefield. She stayed for the rent. She stayed because she had no family left, and with a 7-year-old daughter, being homeless in Chicago wasn't an option. She unlocked the door to apartment 4B on West 18th Street. The lights were off, but the television flickered blue against the peeling wallpaper. Brad was slumped on the sofa, a half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels on the floor. Sarah tried to move silently toward the hallway, praying Lily was already asleep. "You're late." Brad's voice slurred. It was low, dangerous. Sarah froze. "The bus was slow, Brad. I'm just going to check on Lily." "You think I'm stupid?" He stood up, swaying slightly. The blue light from the TV cast long, jagged shadows across his face. "You were flirting for tips, weren't you? Showing a little skin to get an extra buck." "I was working," Sarah whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Please keep your voice down. Lily has school." "Don't tell me what to do in my own house," Brad roared. He lunged. Sarah didn't scream right away. She was used to taking the hit. His heavy hand connected with her shoulder, spinning her around. She crashed into the small entryway table. A ceramic vase, a cheap thing she'd bought to make the place feel like a home, shattered on the floor. "Mommy." The small voice came from the hallway. Lily stood there in her pink pajamas, clutching a ragged stuffed bear. "Go back to your room, Lily," Sarah screamed, scrambling to her feet to put herself between Brad and her daughter. Brad's eyes were glassy and dark. He didn't look at Lily. He looked at Sarah with pure, unadulterated rage. "You made me do this," he spat. He grabbed Sarah by the hair. "Lily, hide now!" Sarah shrieked as Brad threw her against the wall. The drywall cracked. Lily didn't freeze. She did exactly what they had practiced. She turned and sprinted not to her bed, but to the hall closet. She scrambled inside, pulling the door shut, burying herself beneath the winter coats that smelled like mothballs and fear. It was dark. So dark. Lily pulled the burner phone Sarah had bought her from her pajama pocket. Only for emergencies, Mummy had said. If something bad happens, text Grandma. Lily's hands were small and slippery with sweat. She could hear the thud of a fist hitting flesh. She heard her mother begging. Please stop. Please stop. Lily unlocked the screen. The light blinded her for a second. She went to the messages. She didn't have contacts saved properly. She just knew the number by heart. Or she thought she did. She typed the digits fast. Too fast. 312-555-0182. She was supposed to type 0192. She didn't check. She just typed the message, her thumbs flying across the cracked screen. He's beating my mom. She hit send. Please help. Apartment 4B, 18th Street. She hit send again. Then she curled into a ball, put her hands over her ears, and prayed the monster would go away. Dante Moretti sat in the VIP booth of the Onyx Lounge, a private club that cost more to enter than most people earned in a year. The music was a deep, rhythmic bass that vibrated in the chest, but the mood at the table was sullen as the grave. Dante was 32, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that cost $5,000. He nursed a glass of Macallan 25, his dark eyes fixed on the man, sweating profusely across from him. I didn't talk, Dante. I swear on my mother's grave. The man, a low-level runner named Mickey, stammered. Your mother is alive, Mickey. She lives in Florida, Dante said calmly. His voice was smooth, a velvet shroud over a steel blade. And you did talk. You told the Russians about the shipment coming into the port on Thursday. Enzo Dante's right-hand man and oldest friend stood behind Mickey, cleaning his fingernails with a switchblade. He's sweating like a pig, boss. Just give the word. Dante sighed. He hated the mess. He hated the betrayal. But in this life, weakness was a death sentence. He raised his hand to give the signal a simple nod that would end Mickey's life. Buzz. The phone on the table lit up. Dante frowned. Nobody had this number. This was his private line, encrypted, known only to his inner circle and his family. And his family was all dead, except for his estranged brother in Italy. He picked it up, expecting a threat from a rival Don. He read the text. He's beating my mom. Dante stared at the screen. He blinked. A wrong number. A prank. Then the second text came through. Please help. Apartment 4B, 18th Street. The address, West 18th Street. That was in the Pilsen district, territory that used to be neutral but was currently being squeezed by the street gangs. Dante looked at the text again. The spelling was perfect, but the panic radiated off the screen. Boss? Enzo asked, sensing the shift in the air. Problem with the shipment. Dante stood up. The air in the room changed instantly. The predator was no longer toying with its food. It had caught a new scent. Enzo, wrap this up. Put Mickey in the freezer for a few hours. If he's still alive when I get back, maybe I'll let him live. Mickey slumped in relief, sobbing. Where are you going? Enzo asked, holstering his knife. I have an appointment, Dante said, buttoning his suit jacket. Trace this number. I want to know who owns the phone, and I want to know who lives at that address, now. Enzo pulled out his tablet. 30 seconds later, as they walked briskly toward the exit, where Dante's armored black Mercedes S-Class waited, Enzo spoke. Burner phone. Unregistered. But the GPS ping confirms it's at the address. Tenant of the apartment is Sarah Miller. 27. Waitress. Single mother. Daughter named Lily. Lily. Dante stopped walking. The name hit him like a physical blow. His little sister's name had been Lily. She died 10 years ago in a crossfire meant for him. She had been innocent. She had been scared. And he hadn't been there to save her. Dante's jaw tightened until a muscle feathered in his cheek. He looked at his driver. 18th Street. You have 10 minutes to get me there. If you hit a red light, drive through it. The drive was a blur of neon lights and wet asphalt. Dante sat in the back, checking the chamber of his Sig Sauer P-26. He wasn't a vigilante. He was a criminal. A killer. But he had a code. Men fought men. You didn't touch women, and you sure as hell didn't touch children. The Mercedes screeched to a halt in front of the dilapidated brick building. It was a stark contrast to the luxury of the Onyx Lounge. Stay here, Dante ordered Enzo. Boss, you can't go in alone. We don't know what's up there, Enzo protested. If I'm not down in 5 minutes or 5 minutes, come up shooting. Dante moved with the grace of a panther. He bypassed the broken intercom and kicked the front door open. The lock snapped with a dull crack. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his polished shoes silent on the dirty linoleum. 4th floor. He heard the screaming before he reached the door. You useless bitch! A male voice. The sound of crashing furniture. Dante didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. He stepped back and drove his heel into the door of apartment 4B, right next to the deadbolt. The wood splintered and gave way. The scene inside was a tableau of domestic horror. A woman, Sarah, was curled on the floor, blood trickling from her lip. A man, large and reeking of cheap whiskey, stood over her, a heavy belt in his hand. Brad turned, stunned by the intrusion. He saw a man in a $5,000 suit standing in his hallway, looking not like a savior, but like the angel of death. Who the hell are you? Brad slurred, squinting. Get out! This is private property. Dante didn't speak. He scanned the room. He saw the woman. He saw the fear. Then he looked at the closet door. It was cracked open an inch. A small, terrified blue eye peered out. Dante looked back at Brad. You sent a text, Dante said, his voice terrifyingly calm. You asked for a location. Brad looked confused. What? I'm here, Dante said. Brad stepped forward, raising the belt aggressively. I said, get the hell out before I... Dante moved. It was a blur of motion. He caught Brad's wrist mid-swing, twisting it until the bone snapped with a sickening crunch. Brad howled, dropping the belt. Before he could draw a breath to scream, Dante drove his fist into Brad's solar plexus. Brad collapsed to his knees, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Dante grabbed a handful of Brad's greasy hair and slammed his face into the hardwood floor. Once. Twice. Silence. Brad lay motionless, groaning softly. Dante straightened his jacket, adjusting his cuffs. He looked down at Sarah. She was pushing herself up, eyes wide with shock. She looked at the unconscious man, then at the stranger who had just dismantled him in 10 seconds. Are you Sarah? Dante asked. She nodded, unable to speak. Dante turned toward the closet. He knelt down on one knee, disregarding the dust on his trousers. He softened his expression, hiding the monster that had just been in the room. Lily, he called out softly. You can come out now. He won't hurt you anymore. The closet door creaked open. Lily stepped out, clutching the phone. She looked at Dante, this giant man who smelled like expensive cologne and gunpowder. "Did you get my text?" she whispered. Dante nodded. "I did." "Are you the police?" Dante looked at Sarah, then back to the little girl. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "No, Piccola. I'm something else." The silence in the apartment was heavier than the violence had been. Brad was still on the floor, breathing in shallow, wet rasps. Sarah stared at the stranger's polished shoes, her mind racing to catch up with reality. This wasn't a cop. Cops didn't wear $5,000 suits, and they didn't break bones with the casual indifference of a man swatting a fly. "We need to go," Dante said, his voice cutting through the fog in Sarah's mind. He extended a hand to her. It was large, scarred across the knuckles, but steady. Sarah scrambled back, pulling Lily against her chest. "I'm not going anywhere with you. Who are you?" Dante retracted his hand, his expression unreadable. "I am the man who just stopped you from becoming a statistic, Sarah. But right now, I am your only option. When he wakes up." Dante gestured to Brad. "He will be angry, and he will finish what he started. Unless you want to wait for the police, I can call them. They'll file a report, give you a restraining order, and leave. And Brad will be back in 2 hours. Sarah looked at the shattered vase, the cracked drywall. She felt the throbbing bruise on her shoulder. She knew he was right. The system had failed her 3 times already. "Where?" she whispered. "Somewhere safe. Pack a bag. Essentials only. You have 3 minutes." Dante turned to the door as Enzo walked in, gun drawn, but held low against his leg. Enzo looked at the unconscious Brad, then at Dante. "Clean up?" Enzo asked, his tone devoid of emotion. Dante looked at Lily, who was watching with wide, intelligent eyes. "No. Not in front of the kid. Just make sure he doesn't follow us. Call the cleaner for the mess, but leave him breathing. For now." Enzo nodded, holstering his weapon and stepping over Brad's body as if it were a bag of trash. Sarah rushed to the bedroom, her hands shaking as she shoved clothes into a duffel bag. Lily's school uniform, her teddy bear, a toothbrush. Sarah's waitress uniform she still needed to work. She needed money. "Leave the uniform," Dante said from the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, watching the hallway. "You won't be going back to the Rusty Spoon." "I have shifts," Sarah snapped, panic rising. "I need the tips." "You need to stay alive," Dante countered. They moved quickly down the stairs. The cold Chicago air hit Sarah's face, stinging her eyes. The black armored Mercedes was idling at the curb, looking like a spaceship in this run-down neighborhood. As Sarah slid into the leather back seat, clutching Lily, she saw a neighbor peeking through their blinds. They quickly shut them. Nobody saw anything in this neighborhood. That was the rule. Dante got in the front seat. "Drive," he told the driver. "The safe house on Lake Shore." The car pulled away smoothly. Sarah looked out the tinted window as her apartment building her prison for the last 2 years disappeared into the night. "Can I ask you something?" Lily's small voice broke the silence. Dante turned in his seat to look at the girl. His eyes, usually cut and predatory, softened slightly. "Go ahead." "Did you break his arm?" Sarah gasped. "Lily." Dante didn't flinch. "Yes." "Good," Lily said fiercely, hugging her bear. "He's a bad man." Dante looked at Sarah. "She's tougher than you think." "She shouldn't have to be," Sarah retorted, tears finally spilling over. "Why are you doing this? People like you. You don't save people like us. What do you want? Dante looked forward, watching the city lights blur. I don't want anything from you, Sarah. You texted. I answered. Call it balancing the ledger. He didn't tell her the truth. He didn't tell her that looking at Lily was like looking at a ghost. He didn't tell her that for the first time in 10 years, the ice around his heart had cracked. The safe house wasn't a house. It was a penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, with floor-to-ceiling windows that turned the city skyline into a glittering mural. It was cleaner than a hospital and colder than a museum. Don't go near the windows, Dante instructed as they entered. And don't answer the door. Enzo will be stationed in the lobby. I have men in the stairwell. Sarah stood in the middle of the massive living room holding her duffel bag. It looked absurdly cheap against the Italian marble floors. Is this your house? Lily asked, wandering toward a massive glass table. One of them, Dante said. He took off his suit jacket, tossing it onto a chair. Underneath he wore a shoulder holster. Sarah stared at the gun. I can't stay here, Sarah said, her voice trembling. You're mob, aren't you? Dante poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter. I'm a businessman, Sarah, in a difficult industry. You're the Mafia, she accused. I've seen the news. I know who runs this city. You're Moretti, Dante Moretti. Dante paused, glass halfway to his lips. He turned slowly. You're smart. That's good. It will keep you alive. I can't have my daughter around this, around guns, around you. Dante took a step closer, his presence overwhelming. You think you're safer out there. Brad isn't just a drunk, Sarah. I had my men run a background check on the ride over. Did you know he owes $40,000 to the Sullivans? Sarah's blood ran cold. The Sullivans were the Irish mob, ruthless, violent. What? He gambles, Dante said flatly. Badly. He's been using your tips to pay the interest, but the principal is due. Why do you think he was so angry tonight? The deadline is tomorrow. When he can't pay, they'll come for collateral. That means you. And the girl. Sarah sank onto the white sofa, her legs giving out. Oh, God. So you can leave, Dante said, taking a sip of his whiskey. You can walk out that door, but the Sullivans will find you before sunrise. Here you are under my protection, and nobody touches what belongs to me. I don't belong to you, Sarah whispered, though the fight was draining out of her. For now, Dante said, his dark eyes locking onto hers. You do. The next 2 days were a blur of surreal luxury. The fridge was stocked with food Sarah couldn't pronounce. Lily was enchanted. She had her own room with a TV, bigger than their old car. But Sarah couldn't sleep. She paced the hallway at night, listening. Dante was rarely there. He came and went at odd hours, always smelling of smoke and cold air. But on the third night he didn't leave. Sarah found him on the balcony, staring out at the frozen lake. She hesitated, then slid the glass door open. You should be asleep, he said without turning around. I can't sleep in a stranger's house. Dante turned. The wind whipped his dark hair. He looked tired. Not the invincible boss, just a man carrying too much weight. I'm not a stranger anymore, am I? Why ask Dante? Sarah asked, stepping closer. You handle millions of dollars. You run a city. Why save a waitress and a kid? Dante looked down at his hands. My sister. Her name was Lily. She was 7. Sarah went silent. The pieces clicked into place. The look in his eyes when he saw her daughter. What happened to her? My father had enemies. They didn't care about the rules. Dante's voice was devoid of emotion, which made it terrifying. I was supposed to be watching her. I was 22. Arrogant. I left her in the car to go deal with business. 5 minutes. That's all it took. I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. I killed them all, Dante said, looking her in the eye. Every single one of them. But it didn't bring her back. So when I saw that text, when I saw the name, he stopped looking away. Sarah reached out tentatively, touching his arm. The muscle beneath the silk shirt was hard as rock. You're a good man, Dante. Somewhere deep down. Dante laughed, a dark, humorless sound. No, Sarah. I'm a very bad man. But I'm the monster you need right now. Suddenly, Dante's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression hardened instantly. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the mask of the Don. Go inside, he ordered, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the door. What? What is it? Inside. Lock the balcony. Wake up Lily. Get in the bathroom and lock the door. Dante, you're scaring me. Good. Fear keeps you alert. He pulled his gun from his holster, racking the slide. Enzo just radioed. We have a breach. The penthouse was supposed to be a fortress, but fortresses only work if the gates are locked from the inside. Dante moved through the living room, killing the lights. The apartment plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the city glow from outside. He pressed an earpiece into his ear. Enzo, report. Static, then a groan. Dante cursed. He moved Sarah and Lily into the master bathroom, a room lined with marble that would stop small-caliber bullets. Mommy. Lily was rubbing her eyes, clutching her bear. Shh, baby. We're playing a game, Sarah said, her voice shaking violently. She looked at Dante. Who is it? The Sullivans, Dante said grimly. They must have tracked Brad's phone. Or, he paused, or someone sold me out. Stay here. Do not open this door unless you hear my voice. Dante closed the heavy oak door. He stood alone in the dark living room, his breathing controlled. He was outnumbered. He didn't know how many. The elevator chimed. Dante stepped into the shadows of the kitchen. The elevator doors slid open. 3 men stepped out. They wore maintenance uniforms, but they carried suppressed MP5 submachine guns. Clear the rooms, the leader whispered. They fanned out. One moved toward the kitchen. Dante waited. He was a hunter. He waited until the man passed the refrigerator. Dante lunged, wrapping his arm around the man's throat, dragging him into the darkness. A sharp snap of the neck, and the man went limp. Dante lowered him silently. 1 down. He took the man's radio. Check in. The leader's voice crackled. Dante stepped out of the kitchen, raising his Sig Sauer. 2 shots. Pfft. Pfft. The second man dropped a hole in his chest. The leader spun around, firing blindly. Bullets tore into the expensive sofas, feathers exploding into the air like snow. Dante dove behind the kitchen island. Moretti, come out, the leader shouted. We have the building surrounded. Give us the girl and the woman, and maybe we let you live. You're in my house, Mick, Dante called out, recognizing the voice. It was Mick, the Hammer, O'Shea, a high-ranking enforcer for the Sullivans. You really think you're walking out of here? I'm not alone, Mick yelled. Suddenly, the front door, the service entrance, burst open. 2 more men. Dante was pinned. He checked his magazine. 7 rounds left. He needed a distraction. He grabbed a bottle of high-proof vodka from the counter, stuffed a linen napkin into the neck, and lit it with his gold lighter. Catch! Dante yelled. He threw the Molotov cocktail over the island. It smashed against the hardwood floor near the elevator, erupting in a wall of blue and orange flame. The men screamed, scrambling back. Dante stood up and fired. Bang! 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 3 shots, 3 hits. He didn't miss. Silence fell over the room, save for the crackling of the fire and the whimpering of one of the gunmen. Dante walked over to Mick, who was clutching a bleeding leg. Dante kicked the gun away. "Who sent you?" Dante demanded, pressing the hot barrel of his gun to Mick's forehead. "Go to hell, Moretti." "I'm already there. Who told you they were here? Nobody knew." Mick grinned, blood staining his teeth. "Your boy, the one you didn't finish off. Brad. He woke up in the hospital. He called us. Said he'd trade the location of your safe house for his debt." Dante froze. He had shown mercy. He had left Brad alive because of the little girl. And now that mercy had almost killed them. "Bad decision," Dante muttered. He pulled the trigger. The room was silent again. The fire sprinklers kicked in, drenching the apartment in a cold rain. Dante walked to the bathroom door. He knocked the 3 times. "It's me." Sarah opened the door. She was holding a pair of scissors she'd found in the vanity, ready to fight. When she saw Dante, soaked in water and blood gun in hand, she dropped them. "Is it over?" she asked, shielding Lily's eyes. "No," Dante said, wiping water from his face. His expression was no longer human. It was stone. "This was just the opening move. We can't stay here. The Sullivans declared war." "Where do we go?" Dante looked at Lily, then at Sarah. "Italy. My brother's estate in Sicily. It's the only place they can't reach you." "I don't have a passport," Sarah said. Dante grabbed a bag from a hidden compartment in the wall. It was filled with cash and passports. "I have people who handle that. We leave tonight. But first," Dante's eyes darkened. "First, I have a loose end to tie up." "Brad?" Sarah guessed. "He sold you out, Sarah. He told them where we were. He almost got Lily killed tonight." Sarah looked at her daughter, then at the destruction in the living room. The fear in her heart hardened into something cold, something resolved. She realized she couldn't be the victim anymore. "Dante," she said clearly. He stopped at the door. "What? Don't just hurt him," she said, her voice shaking, but firm. "Make sure he never speaks my daughter's name again." Dante nodded slowly. A pact was made. "Consider it done." Chicago General Hospital was quiet at 3:00 a.m. The fluorescent lights hummed with a sick yellow energy. Dante walked through the corridors, his wetsuit replaced by fresh tactical gear he kept in the trunk of the backup car. He wore a doctor's white coat over it, stolen from a locker room near the loading dock. He looked like a surgeon on the prowl, focused, lethal. Room 304. Dante didn't check the chart. He knew Brad was there. He slipped inside and closed the door softly. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound. Brad lay in the bed, his arm in a heavy cast, his face swollen and purple from where Dante had smashed it into the floor 2 nights ago. His eyes were closed. Dante walked to the bedside. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He simply reached out and pinched the IV line, stopping the flow of saline and painkillers. Brad stirred, groaning. His eyes fluttered open. When he saw Dante standing over him, the color drained from his already pale face. He tried to scramble back, but the cast and the rails of the bed trapped him. "You," Brad croaked. "Nurse, help." Scream all you want, Dante said, his voice a low rumble. The night nurse is taking a very long smoke break. Cost me $500. Cheap, considering the privacy. The Sullivans. They said they'd protect me if I gave you up. Brad stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. They said you were dead. They were wrong, Dante said, pulling a chair closer and sitting down. Mick O'Shea is dead. His men are dead. And now we have a problem, Brad. You broke the rules. I just wanted the money I needed to pay them off. You sold a 7-year-old girl to wolves to save your own skin, Dante said. He leaned in close, his dark eyes boring into Brad's soul. You know, in my world we have honor. Even the Sullivans have a twisted version of it. But you're a rat, and rats carry disease. Dante stood up and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a syringe. It wasn't poison. It was pure, uncut heroin. Enough to stop the heart of a horse, let alone a man with a system full of hospital-grade sedatives. What? What is that? Brad's voice rose an octave in panic. An overdose, Dante explained calmly. Tragic. A recovering alcoholic under stress relapses in the hospital. The police won't look twice. The Sullivans won't care. You'll just be another loser who couldn't handle his life. No. Please, Sarah. Does Sarah know? Sarah told me to make sure you never speak her daughter's name again. Dante moved fast. Before Brad could scream, Dante's hand clamped over his mouth. With the other hand, he injected the needle into the IV port. He watched the monitor. The heart rate spiked, panic. Then it slowed. Beep, beep, beep. Flatline. Dante stood there for a moment, watching the life fade from the eyes of the man who had terrorized a little girl. He felt no guilt, only the satisfaction of a job finished. He removed the syringe, wiped his fingerprints from the bed rail, and turned to leave. Goodbye, Brad. An hour later, Dante arrived at a private airstrip on the outskirts of the city. The wind was howling, whipping the rain sideways. A sleek Gulfstream G650 jet sat on the tarmac engines, whining ready for takeoff. Sarah and Lily were already on board, huddled under blankets in the plush leather seats. Enzo stood by the stairs, guarding them. Dante walked up the steps, the wind tearing at his coat. He stepped into the warm, pressurized cabin. Sarah looked up. Her eyes red from crying, but dry now. She looked at Dante's face, composed, stoic. She didn't ask if he did it. She knew. Is it done? She asked softly. Dante nodded once. We are ghosts now, Sarah. Sarah Miller and Brad don't exist anymore. From the moment those wheels leave the ground, you are someone else. Who am I? She asked, fear mixing with a strange sense of liberation. Dante sat across from her, his knees brushing hers. You are under the protection of the Moretti family. We are going to Sicily. My brother Massimo has a villa near Palermo. It is a fortress. You will be safe there. Lily poked her head out from the blanket. She was holding a cookie the flight attendant had given her. Do they have pizza in Italy? Dante smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his harsh face. Lily, you are about to eat the best pizza in the world. The plane lurched forward, accelerating down the runway. Sarah looked out the window as the lights of Chicago, the city of her pain, her poverty, her fear, fell away beneath them. She reached out and took Dante's hand. He didn't pull away. He laced his fingers through hers, holding on tight as they ascended into the darkness, heading toward the dawn. The heat in Sicily was different than in Chicago. In Chicago, the heat was suffocating, trapped between concrete and asphalt, smelling of exhaust and garbage. Here on the northern coast of the island, the heat was a living thing, golden, heavy, and fragrant with the scent of wild oregano sea salt and the lemons that grew in the terraced groves below the Villa Moretti. Sarah Miller, though she hadn't used that name in half a year, stood on the limestone balcony of the master suite, her hands gripping the warm railing. Below her, the Mediterranean Sea stretched out like a sheet of hammered turquoise, endless and calm. It was 9:00 a.m. on a Tuesday. In her old life, she would have been 3 hours into a shift at the Rusty Spoon, her feet aching, her apron stained with grease, her mind calculating how many tips she needed to buy milk and bread. Now she was wearing a white linen sundress that cost more than her old car. Her hair, once brittle and tied back in a messy bun, fell in loose, healthy waves down her back. The bruises were long gone, faded from her skin, just as the nightmares were slowly fading from her mind. But the silence was the hardest thing to get used to. "Mama!" The shout broke the stillness, and Sarah's heart leaped not in fear, but in joy. She looked down into the courtyard. Lily was running across the cobblestones, chasing a soccer ball. But she wasn't alone. She was being chased by Luca and Marco, two hulking men who looked like they could bench press a Fiat. They were Dante's most trusted guards in Sicily. Men with scars and tattoos and guns hidden beneath their jackets. And currently, they were letting a 7-year-old girl dribble a soccer ball around them while feigning dramatic defeats. "Goal!" Lily screamed, throwing her arms up. "Luca, you're too slow. It's the pasta piccola." Luca laughed, bending over to catch his breath, winking at Sarah up on the balcony. "Nonna Maria feeds me too much." Sarah smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. 6 months ago, Lily wouldn't leave a closet. She flinched at loud noises. She wouldn't look men in the eye. Now she was the princess of a Sicilian fortress, speaking a mix of English and Italian, commanding the loyalty of hardened killers, as if she were born to the throne. But where was the king? Sarah's smile faltered slightly. Dante had been gone for 10 days. "Business in Rome," he had said, kissing her on the forehead before slipping into the black Maserati at dawn. He hadn't called. He never called when he was working. It was the rule. To protect them. To keep the lines clean. Sarah turned back into the room. It was massive, with frescoed ceilings and furniture that belonged in a museum. But without him, it felt like a gilded cage. She walked downstairs, her bare feet silent on the marble. She found Nonna Maria in the kitchen, a woman of 80 with hands like gnarled roots and eyes that saw everything. "Mangia, Sara," Nonna commanded, pointing to a plate of fresh figs and ricotta. "You are too thin. Dante will blame me." "He's not here to blame anyone, Nonna," Sara said softly, picking at a fig. "Do you know when he's coming back?" Nonna stopped kneading the dough for the evening's bread. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked at Sarah with a mixture of pity and steel. "He is a Moretti," she said, as if that explained everything. "He carries the weight of the family. The Chicago business. It takes time to bury." "Bury?" Sarah asked, a chill running through her warm veins. "To finish," Nonna corrected, though Sarah knew the first word was the honest one. "He is making sure you are safe. That is what men like him do. They walk in the dark so you can walk in the sun." Sarah walked out to the terrace, the fig untasted in her hand. That was the problem. She was walking in the sun, yes, but she was walking alone. The sun began to dip low in the sky, painting the vineyards in shades of purple and burnt orange. Sarah sat on the stone wall overlooking the winding driveway, lined with cypress trees. She did this every evening, waiting. She knew she should be grateful. She was safe. Brad was gone. Dante never said exactly what happened, but the way he looked when he came out of that hospital room told her enough. The Sullivans had been dismantled, their empire crumbled by federal indictments and convenient accidents that Dante had orchestrated from the shadows. She had everything she ever wanted: security, wealth, a future for Lily. But she had fallen in love with the architect of that future, and loving Dante Moretti was a dangerous game. A glint of metal caught the light in the distance. A car. Sarah stood up, her breath hitching. The black Maserati wound its way up the hill, followed by a Land Rover carrying the security detail. They crunched to a halt in front of the villa. The doors opened. Dante stepped out. He looked exhausted. He wore a dark navy suit. The tie loosened, the top button of his shirt undone. He had a shadow of stubble on his jaw, and his eyes were hidden behind aviator sunglasses. He didn't smile when he saw her. He just stopped staring at her, as if she were a mirage. Dante! Lily came sprinting from the garden, abandoning her game. She launched herself at him. Dante dropped his briefcase and caught her effortlessly, swinging her up into his arms. For a second, the mask slipped. He buried his face in her hair, holding her tight, breathing her in. "Did you bring me a present?" Lily asked, patting his cheek. "I brought you myself," Dante rasped. "Isn't that enough?" "Maybe," Lily giggled. "Did you see the Pope? I saw a lot of people, Tesoro. Now down. I need to talk to your mum." He set her down gently. "Go find Luca. Tell him I said you can have one gelato before dinner." Lily cheered and ran off. Dante turned to Sarah. He took off his sunglasses. His eyes were dark, rimmed with red, and filled with an emotion Sarah couldn't place. It looked like guilt. "Hi," Sarah whispered, stepping closer. She wanted to hug him, to kiss him, but his body language was rigid. He was a wall. "We need to talk," he said. His voice was flat. "Business." "In the study." The study was the only room in the villa that felt cold. It was lined with books and smelled of leather and tobacco. Dante walked behind the massive oak desk, putting a physical barrier between them. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He slid it across the desk toward her. "What is this?" Sarah asked, not touching it. "Your future," Dante said. He poured himself a drink, his hand shaking slightly, the first sign of weakness she had ever seen in him. Sarah opened the envelope. Inside were passports, driver's licenses, deeds to a house, bank account information with a balance that made her head spin. The name on the passport was Sarah Evans. The picture was her. "What is this?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "The threat is gone," Dante said, staring at his glass. "The Sullivans are finished. Chicago is quiet. I made a deal with the feds to keep the heat off. You are in the clear." "I don't understand. You don't have to hide anymore, Sarah. You don't have to live in a fortress surrounded by men with guns. That portfolio," he gestured to the papers. "There is a house in Seattle, a quiet neighborhood. Good schools for Lily. There is enough money in that account for you to never work again, or to open a restaurant if you want. You can be normal. You can be free." Sarah stared at him. The silence stretched thick and suffocating. "You're kicking us out," she whispered. Dante looked up, his eyes blazing with a sudden fierce intensity. I am setting you free. Do you think this is a life waiting for me to come home, wondering if I'm dead, wondering if my enemies will find this place? I am a cancer, Sarah. Eventually the violence comes back. It always does. I promised to save you. This is me saving you. Sarah looked at the papers. It was a perfect life. Safe. Clean. Normal. It was everything she had prayed for when she was hiding in the closet with a cracked phone. She looked up at Dante. She saw the man who had broken a man's arm for hurting her. The man who had flown them across the ocean. The man who let her daughter paint his fingernails pink when he thought no one was watching. She slowly closed the envelope. No. Dante froze. What? No. Sarah said louder this time. She picked up the envelope and threw it into the fireplace, where a small log burned. Dante moved to stop her, but it was too late. The papers caught fire, curling into black ash. Are you insane? Dante roared, slamming his hand on the desk. Do you know how much work went into that? That was your way out. I don't want a way out, Sarah yelled back, walking around the desk to face him. I don't want Seattle. I don't want to be Sarah Evans. I want to be here. You don't know what you're asking for, Dante hissed, grabbing her shoulders. I'm not a good man, Sarah. I have blood on my hands. Gallons of it. You are light. You are good. If you stay with me, I will dim your light. I will ruin you. You didn't ruin me, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. She reached up and cupped his face, forcing him to look at her. Brad ruined me. The world ruined me. You put me back together. I did it to pay a debt, Dante lied through his voice cracked. Because of my sister. It started that way, Sarah admitted. But look me in the eye, Dante, and tell me you don't love us. Tell me you want us to leave because you don't care. Dante stared at her. His chest heaved. He looked at her lips, then her eyes. He was a man who had faced down hitmen and federal agents without blinking, but facing the love of this woman terrified him. I can't, he rasped. Then stop trying to be a martyr, Sarah said. We aren't your prisoners, Dante. We aren't your charity case anymore. We are your family, unless you don't want us. Dante let out a sound, half groan, half laugh. It was the sound of a surrender. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her so close she couldn't breathe, burying his face in her neck. I wanted you from the moment I saw you standing in that broken apartment, he confessed into her skin. I was just too much of a coward to admit it. I thought if I let you go, God would forgive me for everything else. You don't need God's forgiveness, Sarah said, running her fingers through his dark hair. You have mine. Dante pulled back. He looked at her with a reverence that made her knees weak. If you stay, he said, his voice low and deadly serious. You stay forever. There is no going back. You become a Moretti. You become mine. The enemies, the danger, the life. You take it all. I'm not afraid of the dark anymore, Sarah said. Not as long as I'm with you. Dante kissed her. It wasn't like the first kiss on the terrace, which was tentative and full of questions. This kiss was an answer. It was possessive, deep and final. It sealed a pact stronger than any marriage license. It was a promise of violence against the world and tenderness for her. When they finally broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. I have something else for you, he murmured. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sarah gasped. Dante! I bought it in Rome, he said. I told myself I would only give it to you if you refused the plane tickets, if you were crazy enough to choose the monster over the freedom. He opened the box. Inside sat a yellow diamond, as bright and fierce as the Sicilian sun, set in heavy gold. "Sarah," Dante said, not kneeling but standing tall, meeting her eye as an equal. "I cannot promise you a normal life. I cannot promise you peace. But I promise you that as long as there is breath in my lungs, nothing will ever hurt you or Lily again. Will you marry me?" Sarah looked at the ring, then at the man. The Mafia boss, the killer, the savior, the father figure, the love of her life. "Yes," she whispered. Dante slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Good," he said, a wicked smirk finally returning to his lips, "because I really didn't want to move to Seattle." Later that night, the villa was quiet. Lily was asleep, worn out from soccer and gelato. Sarah and Dante sat on the terrace, sharing a bottle of wine. The air was cooling the crickets singing in the vineyards. Sarah leaned her head on Dante's shoulder, his arm heavy and warm around her. She looked at her phone lying on the table. It was a new iPhone, sleek and uncracked. She thought about the old burner phone, the cheap plastic thing she had bought for emergencies. She thought about the terror of that night, the shaking hands, the wrong digit that had bridged two worlds that never should have met. "What are you thinking about?" Dante asked, his thumb tracing circles on her arm. "Fate," Sarah said softly. "I was trying to text my grandmother. Her number ended in 0192. Yours was 0182. Dante laughed softly. "Remind me to send a thank you card to the phone company." "I was so scared," Sarah admitted. "I thought I was sending my daughter's cry for help into the void. I thought no one would answer." Dante kissed the top of her head. "Someone always answers, Sarah. You just have to be lucky enough to text the wrong number." Sarah smiled, looking out at the moon reflecting on the sea. She wasn't a waitress anymore. She wasn't a victim. She was the queen of this castle, and the beast beside her was hers to keep. "Dante. Do you think Lily is asleep?" "Probably." "Why?" Sarah stood up, taking his hand and pulling him toward the glass doors of the bedroom. "Because," she smiled the diamond on her finger, catching the moonlight, "I think I need to show you just how grateful I am." Dante stood up, checking his watch. "I have a meeting with the capos at dawn." "Cancel it," Sarah said. Dante looked at her, this woman who used to apologize for existing, now giving orders to the Don of the Moretti crime family. He grinned, tossing his phone onto the table next to hers. "Meeting cancelled." He swept her up into his arms, carrying her across the threshold, leaving the cool night air behind for the warmth of the life they had built together. The burner phone on the table buzzed once, a notification from a news app, Chicago Police Close Case on Sullivan crime family. But nobody read it, and nobody cared. The past was dead. Long live the king and queen. And exhale. Wow. From a terrifying text in a closet to a yellow diamond in Sicily. That is the definition of a glow-up, people I love, that Sarah didn't take the easy way out. She realized that safe isn't always happy, and sometimes you have to embrace the chaos to find where you belong. But let's be real, that scene where Dante tried to send them to Seattle. I was screaming at the screen. Question of the day. Be honest in the comments. If a Mafia boss offered you $5 million and a safe house in the suburbs to leave him alone, would you take the money and run? Or would you burn the papers like Sarah did? I think I'd take the money. but maybe that's just me. If you liked this story, please destroy that like button. Like Dante destroyed the Sullivans. It helps the algorithm so much. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because next week we are dropping a story about a runaway bride who hides in the back seat of a car that turns out to be a getaway vehicle for a bank robbery. You do not want to miss that one.